Welcome to the studio. You are majestic. I finally saw Joker.
Hey, I just saw Heat.
I watched it after I watched the new Folie A Deux, so...
I want to talk about it now.
You know, sometimes you miss out on a big pop culture thing, and it feels like the moment has passed. You don't want to get into it then, like how I've never seen Game of Thrones, and at this point, I'm just overwhelmed by the thought of it. Well, that was me with Joker. It happened, it started gaining traction. I remember there's this whole drama with headlines about how young men were gonna start riots after seeing it.
Had your kids, had your wife.
5 years later, it's now my part-time job to talk about movies, and this sequel drops, and it's being called the worst movie of the year. I was curious, and I'll admit, a little part of me thought that might have been an overreaction. I was so young and naive then. So I watched the Joker sequel, and that sucked, but I was curious about how it was screwing up the first one. So, strapped in for round two, with round one.
You're a little confused, but he got the spirit.
Let's do a twofer, shall we? We'll talk about the Joker and whether or not it really is a rallying cry for men's health or the I live in my momminess basement manifesto that some think, depending on where you get your news. After that, we'll talk about the bad joke that is the follow-up, because, wow, what is not a joke is how much I need you to hit that like button. Oh, that sequel was so bad I had to have the comfort of this cat cup and Yorkshire Gold. Can't take any chances. Honestly, I was so surprised by A, how much I enjoyed this movie, and B, how much it was not the sweaty fedora-wearing incel convention movie that I was led to believe. I'm so shocked that the same person wrote both of these films, because the second one is boring, flat, and seems to despise the audience, while the first is a nuanced look at multiple societal issues. This is an excellent origin story for a tragic villain because it doesn't attempt to make you feel sorry for Arthur Fleck or justify him. Instead, it presents a multi-layered tragedy that added up to the Joker. Or it would have, but I guess Arthur isn't that now. There are many themes interacting at once, and each one is given fair treatment. First, we have this economic strife underlying the whole thing. Arthur's story opens up with a guy's store going out of business. The city is dirty. Arthur lives in a crappy part of town. His building looks awful. There's a general eat the rich attitude just below the surface that will get ignited. This isn't a heavy focus of the movie, but a backdrop, and it keeps escalating. Like, people don't love Thomas Wayne, but we never really see why. Arthur is not a reliable narrator, so we can't fully trust the presentations of him that we see. What's great is that we don't confirm much at all. We just see the reactions to his general presence. The audience gets to see how people project onto him. Closely tied to this is the mental struggles that Arthur is dealing with. Again, we see a nuanced approach, painting Arthur as both a victim and participant. One thing that separates him from more common mental struggles we usually talk about is that he is physically brain damaged. Like, he got abused as a child, which I didn't know before I watched the movie, so now I'm looking at people who say Joker is literally me, like...
Congratulations, you played yourself.
But we see the fix is pills. Tons of pills. His doctor says he's on 7 of them, because that's how we do it. However, Arthur isn't some poor, neglected soul. He is also unwilling to do any kind of work. He's not bringing his journal most days. He's not writing in it consistently. He's not engaging with the doctor. But then we flip back to the critique of the system as a whole, because this therapist is just asking canned questions, going through the motions. All around, the system, the doctor, and even the patient aren't taking this seriously. It's a great critique of the system, but also about how we expect things to be fixed. We want the government to throw money at problems. Well, this is what they do. They need quantifiables. That's pills and therapy sessions, and it's obviously not doing anything for Arthur. That not caring is another interesting undercurrent in the film. Arthur isn't the only one with no purpose. The general feeling all throughout is that everyone is shuffling through life. Arthur doesn't feel that anyone cares about him, as he says in his final speech on the show, but we also see that he doesn't care about anyone else either. His neighbor is not a person in his mind, just a fantasy. His little person coworker, Gary, not a person, just someone to make fun of. As much as he feels ignored, he also objectifies everyone around him. It's a neat commentary on the interpersonal disconnect that we see in society. Not the first time Phoenix has done this either. He's really good at it.
Sometimes I think I've felt everything I'm ever gonna feel.
That movie was frighteningly ahead of its time. I need to talk about that one soon. But what I found most interesting in Joker is how we see the role of the news in society, and I would group social media into that, even though the film isn't specifically dealing with it. It's just the general distortion of information. Early on, we see two stories happening. Arthur is having the worst week of his life. He's killed 3 people, sort of on accident, but now he feels powerful and scared and excited, a whole rush of emotions, and he's trying to sort it out while also discovering that his mom lied to him and coming to grips with the fact that he's genuinely crazy. But separate from that, the news has turned the killings into an act of economic justice because the guys on the train happen to be finance bros. In the background, we see tension rising in the city, but we know that it's all wrong. It's just sad Arthur and a tragic series of events that are now being misinterpreted by everyone, and the flames are being fanned by the news. This is the most poignant commentary on how news shapes our perception. And we even got real-world examples when the news decided that this movie was really about incels. That's all I heard about when it came out, and how it was appealing to all the angry young men out there. Arthur was gonna be their Braveheart. What's odd is that, as I've hopefully shown a little, it's about so much more than that. And it also doesn't paint Arthur as the best guy. He's not blameless here. Unfortunately, there were a few guys who did see the movie as cathartic and Arthur as justified. There are some unhappy men in society that, if nothing else, just felt understood. I'll take it from here. Fellas, let's have a quick chat, man to man, because this movie does bring up a lot about men's mental health and loneliness and purpose and all that, and those are very important topics. I agree, they get ignored quite a bit. Sadly, some male influencers do talk about them, but only to use them as a shield for criticism and as a lure to get guys paying attention. I've made no secret of my feelings for the red pill and the boyosphere space. I mention it from time to time, and often I'll get people who think soy boy is intelligent and cutting insult. They need to read more. But I also get people who explain that the red pill guys understand them, and they point out the problems facing men, and also that my ideas for what men should do are mired in the past, that society has changed. The first point starts correct. Those guys identify the issues facing men, and it is refreshing to hear somebody say, I get it, I understand you. However, and this is a real phrase that I annoy my kids with, you need to be a problem solver, not just a problem identifier. They really love when I say that. These guys don't have real solutions. They identify that men feel purposeless, and then they recommend materialism and hedonism. These are not purposes, guys. Gaining stuff, upping your game so you get respect, getting a hot chick. Come on, fellas, let's go to first principles. Why do these things have value? Because other people value them? Wouldn't you rather be respected as a man of character, of wisdom, of genuine leadership, not the sales training kind? Anyway, the second thing about society and how it's, not the same as it was. If your values, your definition of how a man should behave is based on whether society is good or not at the moment, then you don't have real values. Values don't change because your perception of society changed. Furthermore, the talk about society not appreciating men is dangerously close to sounding like I only do right when I get rewarded. And that's not what you want to be, right? That's literal child behavior. We're putting away childish things, men. You need to take some time and make a list, like write it down physically if you want to. Write down the values of manhood. What are some of the core things that a man should be doing, regardless of what women and society are doing? And don't stop at vague platitudes like, be a provider. Make sure you note examples of that value in practice and where it should stop. Nothing wrong with making money, right? But why are you making it? How much do you really need? And what besides money are you supposed to provide? You need to know the what and the why, or you will be tossed about on whatever cultural current or red pill riptide is happening. For example, I've stated multiple times that my short list of important human values contains service. This does not change based on how deserving the recipient is. My basis for this is theological. Paul is very clear that no one is righteous, not even one. And yet, at the proper time, while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. So, when I hear people say that society doesn't deserve men, well, I don't deserve God's grace, but it was still given. And as he said after describing the Good Samaritan, go and do likewise. Guys, if we say that there is such a thing as masculine virtue and we think that society is terrible, then isn't that even more reason to be the very best example of that virtue? Last point on the men's loneliness thing is this. If you go watch guys talk about it, they describe not having friends, not fitting in with other guys. How is that women's fault? How is that society's fault? And here again, we see materialism fail. How can you talk about supporting other men when you're trying to compete with them and exert power over them by making them respect your external material gains? How can you build another man up while simultaneously trying to dominate him? Listen, if you want to talk about something like a purpose or values or a struggle, or you just want to tell me something cool in your life so that I can be excited with you, shoot me an email. It's in the description of the channel, or you could do it in the comments if you're comfortable with that. If we're saying that men are struggling and that men understand other men, then how is this anyone else's problem? Skipper, can you tell them?
They're us. And if anyone's gonna save us, it's us.
If I could piggyback off of that, because I attend meetings and that is a real thing that I say sometimes, this is one of the areas where Arthur himself is failing. His coworker Gary is a little person who clearly gets picked on at work. Does Arthur try to befriend him? No, he joins in the mocking. Arthur is just as uncaring about others as they are to him, and his unreliable narration makes him look so pitiful, but it doesn't fully hide the truth that he is a participant in his own isolation. What we end up with is a fantastic villain story that achieves what villains are really for. Arthur is scary. Not because he's a rampaging psycho, torturing and terrorizing. Not because he is the epitome of evil. Arthur is scary because his situation isn't that outlandish. His motives are clear and understandable, to the point that people feel a little bad for him. He doesn't have any friends, he feels alone, he's on way too many meds, and he loses his job, and he just snaps. He disconnects from reality. People are no longer people, but objects. Anyone he decides is an obstacle, anyone he decides to blame for his misfortune, dies. And he's not even upset after. Arthur becomes a villain, and it is a terrifying reality for too many people, and anyone who feels seen by him should be shaken by that. Anyone relating to the anarchist serial killer in the story should rightly be concerned. That is why he is effective. And this movie had a cool, ambiguous ending, playing on Arthur's unreliability, and it stood on its own as a well-written tragedy. It also could have been used to launch the Joker as a character in the DCEU, if that's what they wanted. But 5 years later, somehow the writer and director of this excellent film made a sequel that squandered any and all potential.
Oh, you ain't know what that was? Oh, that doo-doo, man.
There's been quite a bit of debate on whether Todd Phillips hates the audience that liked his first movie. Many got the impression that he disliked the men who thought of Arthur as justified and held him up as a kind of anti-hero. And so the theory is that he spitefully destroyed the character. I can't find any quote from Phillips to confirm this, though his quote about the ending sounds pretty cavalier toward the audience. I guess we all got punked because Todd said the first movie is called Joker, not The Joker. It's an origin story, not the origin story, you idiots. How could you all not see that? Why did you morons assume 2 full movies starring Joaquin Phoenix would actually be about his character and not a nameless rando who is blurred in the background during the final 2 minutes of the second movie? He might not hate the guys who relate to Arthur, but he sure is thumbing his nose at everyone, and weirdly, the audience doesn't respond well to that. The Folie A Deux committed the darkest of cinema sins. It was boring. The first several minutes find Arthur shuffling around, despondent, and just generally sad. He stays this way for quite some time until he meets Lady Gaga. Suddenly, he has a reason to live, but she doesn't want Arthur, she wants the Joker. So they start a toxic relationship where she tries to encourage him to be the Joker, often through song. Yes, this movie is a musical. I don't know why either, no. Supposedly, Joaquin Phoenix had a dream about it, and they ran with that. The issue is that it isn't used as a device in any way, except one. The songs are not great, they don't move the story forward, and they go on forever. The only positive twist that they attempted was using the songs to transition Arthur and Gaga into their fantasies. They usually start out singing pretty poorly, and then their voices get better as they fully enter their daydream. It's a really neat touch. Unfortunately, they used it with Gaga to show that she was also psychotic, but then later in the film, she's actually not crazy, she's just manipulative. They couldn't decide what her mental state should be. The music also has an issue for the tone. Where Joker was gritty, very realistic, Folie A Deux's long musical numbers feel flippant. Half the movie is a boring courtroom drama where they're trying to prove Arthur has split personalities, but there's no tension, it just drags. It seems like they wanted to wrap up Arthur's story with a short epilogue, but they needed to fill 2 hours, so...
And that's why Europe is the best continent of all. There, I did it. 1,000 words.
The other major problem is that the characters go nowhere. As you're probably aware, Arthur dies in the end, so his story really goes nowhere. And since the writers knew that, they didn't bother working on his character arc. The sequel is not an exploration into the aftermath of his crimes, or changes to mental health care, or the societal effects that he's had. They pretty much just retold his arc from the first movie, but instead of becoming the Joker at the end, this time he chooses to stay sad Arthur and then die. Thrilling, right? Lady Gaga doesn't go anywhere either. She begins the movie by hunting for a crazy felon to marry, seemingly crazy herself, and then leaves Arthur and is never seen again. We can't tell if she loved the Joker persona or just wanted attention or is just nutty. It's all pointless. Honestly, more critique of this movie is Like, what can I say that hasn't been said by now? It's just bad. And there is so little substance to this film, there isn't even much to critique. Instead, to close, let's talk about the lost potential. Like, what could have been done? Let's pretend for a moment that Phillips really did hate the audience that liked the first movie, and he just decided to spit in their faces, which is why Arthur is just pathetic, and the guards make him kiss a guy, and then they violate him in the bathroom, which is what makes him give up and admit to not being the Joker. If that was Todd's aim, he still could have written an interesting story where Arthur is conflicted. He's plunged into the anarchistic world that he helped create, increasingly becoming disillusioned with these people that claim to love him. And it really would have played into the first movie as well, because Arthur was lonely, and now he's got all this attention, but it's not at all what he wants or needs. We would see his inner struggle between being Arthur and giving in to this Joker persona that they all want, instead of being told over and over that they are separate people without any evidence on screen, which is what we got in the sequel. The audience might not have loved this theme, but we will forgive a lot if it's well done. Or if Phillips was actually intent on replacing Arthur with the real Joker, I'm not sure that would have worked in any case whatsoever after building him up for an entire movie. But here is an idea. If they wanted to replace Arthur and have his story lead into the real origin of the real Joker, they still could have used Harley Quinn, but they would have needed the other Joker to be a third main character. Again, we could be playing on Arthur's need for acceptance and even Quinn's desire for a Joker. We could see his new sidekick trying to emulate Arthur, seeing that same unease as Arthur begins to question, is that what I'm really like? Any of you parents ever see your kids play dolls and then the mom and dad are not what you want to be, but you clearly are? We would also have some love triangle drama, and, Quinn is attracted to a Joker, whichever one of them is being more Joker-ish. So the situation escalates as the two guys compete for attention, and they spiral into crazy, and it makes Quinn act more outlandish, because she is enjoying the attention as well. When Arthur finally realizes that he doesn't want to keep up, he doesn't like where all of this is going, he just wanted a friend and a girlfriend. This isn't fun. At that point, Quinn and new Joker would turn on him. Same ending, except new Joker is actually a character this time, and Quinn's motivations are explored more. To be honest, writing a sequel at all would have been difficult, since the first movie was wrapped up pretty well. They might have explored the fallout from this, 1 week of madness in the first movie, with Arthur maybe fully becoming the Joker and society devolving with riots, but I don't think it would have had the same emotional impact. What do you think? If you had to do a sequel to Joker, where would you take that story? And what are your thoughts on the Folie A Deux as it is? Let me know in the comments. I appreciate you watching, and I'll see you next time.